Hi, everybody. Let's make sure we're live here. Let's make sure we're live. There we are. Hi. Okay. Happy Monday. Welcome back. Welcome back. I look forward to talking with y'all. Let's see here. Let me open up the comments so I can see what's going on here. Make sure live on Instagram, live on Facebook, live on YouTube. We are live. Awesome. Okay, so I have a confession. For years, if you had said the word creatine to me, I would have pictured a 25-year-old guy. Let's say Chad. Chad has a shaker bottle. Chad owns at least 3 tank tops with armholes large enough to expose one side of his kidneys. Chad says things like gains, and Chad has never once had to Google whether putting on a bra qualifies as resistance training. Just saying. So naturally, I assumed that creatine had absolutely nothing to do with me. Nothing to do with me. I'm 53 years old. I'm not trying to bench press a Buick. I'm not. I'm not preparing for a bodybuilding competition. No, I have no desire to become so muscular that I have to turn sideways to enter Costco. No. But then I start researching. And we know what happens when I start researching things. This is where things generally go off the rails because I do not casually Google something. No. I open a tab that leads into a study. That study reference leads into another study, and then I find an interview, and then I find another interview, and then I find a researcher, and then I Google that researcher because they said something that made me go, wait, whoa, excuse me, what? And then suddenly it's 1:17 in the morning. I have 37 tabs open on my computer, and apparently I am trying to personally solve cellular metabolism. Yeah, let's say that. I'm personally trying to solve cellular metabolism before breakfast. So I thought I was researching a gym supplement. No, suddenly I'm reading about ATP production, phosphocreatine, brain energy, sleep deprivation, the blood-brain barrier. Yeah. So I don't casually Google something. Yeah, that just doesn't happen. So this led me down the rabbit hole, which is why you're here. Because rabbit holes is what we do here. Rabbit holes is what we do here in beauty alchemy. So, yes, trying to solve everything, trying to get everything done before breakfast. And here we are, 3:07 in the afternoon. So, what does this have to do with what we do with beauty alchemy? What does creatine monohydrate have something like? We've got so many things. Like I said, we've got ATP production. We have the blood-brain barrier, women, menopause. All these things are linked with creatine. Like, how is this possible? Muscle signaling as an organ, cognitive reserve. So I'm Googling all this stuff and learning, and my mind is being absolutely blown. And I'm thinking, whoa, this may not be a gym bro conversation. This is not just for gym pros. This is an aging conversation. And more specifically, this may be a conversation women my age have not been invited to nearly enough. So today we're opening the case file, beauty alchemy style. And yes, we're going to get super nerdy. I wore my big glasses. We're going to get super nerdy, but I promise I'm going to translate, because if I have to learn the words phosphocreatine energy system, you're all coming with me. So before we start, tell me in the comments, before today, what did you think creatine was for? Did you think it was just for bodybuilders, athletes, big muscles, the gym bros, they can't put their arms down? Because that's what I thought. And then you hear the horror stories. So, this is just what happens here. You hear the horror stories and people get scared, and this is where research comes in. So you don't have to do all the research. I did it all for you. So let's talk ATP. Let's start with ATP. Let's start with the nerd stuff. Every cell in your body needs energy. Your muscles need energy to contract. Your heart needs energy to beat. Your brain needs energy to think. Your cells need energy just to maintain the basic business of keeping you alive. And one of the primary forms of immediately usable cellular energy is something called ATP, adenosine triphosphate. Now, ATP is one of those terms scientists like to use when they would like normal people to leave the conversation. I don't do that. I refuse. So here's my translation. Think of ATP as your body's spendable energy currency. Not your savings account, not your 401k, not your IRA. The cash in your wallet is your ATP. The problem is your cells don't keep an endless pile of immediately available ATP. They don't keep it sitting around. They use it. And then they have to regenerate it. And this is where creatine gets interesting, because inside the tissues, such as muscle, creatine can participate in what is called the creatine-phosphocreatine system. Very simplified version. Creatine can be stored as phosphocreatine. And phosphocreatine can help rapidly regenerate ATP when energy demand suddenly rises. Now, if your eyes just completely glazed over, I know I lost some of you. Come back, because I have a Gen X translation. Are you ready? Are you ready for this? Yep. ATP is Crockett. ATP gets top billing. ATP has the white linen suit, the Ferrari, the dramatic stare across Biscayne Bay. ATP is the immediate usable energy doing all the flashy work. But when energy demand suddenly rises, Crockett can't handle the entire drug cartel alone. No, that's where creatine comes in. Creatine is my tubs. Creatine is my tubs, my sidekick. Creatine is standing there saying, I have got your back. Now, while Crockett continues looking fabulous in a pastel blazer. Let's just take a moment for all those pastel blazers and the Hirachis with no socks. Yeah. The actual biochemistry, more complicated? Yeah, obviously. But the basic idea is that creatine-phosphocreatine system helps support rapid regeneration of immediately usable cellular energy, and apparently even our cells. Our cells understood in 1985 that nobody should be expected to do everything alone. So now this made sense for me. You're probably laughing at me right now. You're probably laughing. But this made sense to me this made sense for the muscle. You lift something heavy, you sprint, you climb stairs, you carry the groceries in, you chase a toddler, like for all you moms, you chase a toddler who's just discovered permanent markers. Wow. Energy demand rises super quickly. I understand. Now I understand why athletes cared so much about creatine. But then I hit the first plot twist, because muscle is not the only tissue that needs energy. Your brain's very expensive. Your brain is metabolically expensive. For its size, our little noggin uses a surprisingly large share of the body's energy, which frankly feels super suspicious, because mine apparently has enough energy to replace something embarrassing that I said in 1994 when I wake up at 3:17 in the morning, but not enough to remember what I was about to Google, which leads down other rabbit holes. Anyway, but the brain has enormous amount of energy demands. Neurons are maintaining electrical gradients. They're sending signals. They're resetting. They're communicating, processing information. keeping this entire operation that we call you online. And that, I think I have an image for that. Hold on, hold please. But that raises another question. Here we are. Check this out. If creatine participates in cellular energy buffering, what happens in the brain? What happens in the brain? And this is where my innocent little supplement search became a 37 open tab research experiment, because the brain has its own relationship with creatine, and there's creatine synthesis, there's transport, there are tissue specific questions, and researchers have been exploring whether changing creatine availability may matter under certain conditions. And that's where it gets really, really interesting, because the brain is not just a quadricep wearing glasses. You can't automatically assume that because a certain dose affects creatine stores in muscles, the exact same dose over the exact same period of time creates the exact same response in the brain. And this came up repeatedly in expert conversations that I was listening to. It was quite interesting. And if you want to know who I was listening to, by all means, message me. I will happily share everything that I dove into on this, because I don't gatekeep. So we have the blood-brain barrier, which you can see on this image here, the blood-brain barrier. Now, we can think of our blood-brain barrier as kind of like the nightclub bouncer. Muscles outside going, Tubbs, come on in. But the brain is behind a velvet rope with a clipboard saying, sir, are you on the list? So even creatine cannot just stroll into the brain like it owns a place. So this is where dosing conversations become very fascinating, because the common everyday creatine conversation many of us hear is 3 to 5 grams. Done. 3 to 5 grams a day, done. But when researchers start asking questions about the brain, you sometimes hear very different research protocols, different doses, different durations, different populations, different conditions. And I need to say this very, very clearly. That does not mean you hear a research dose and copy it tomorrow morning. So a study protocol is not your personal prescription. I am not giving a dosage, something for you to do. This is for you to do your own research and come to your own conclusions. So scientifically, it raises a very, very interesting question, because are we oversimplifying creatine when we pretend muscle, bone, and brain are all the same target tissue? That question really hooked me, because a stressed brain may be a different conversation. So this is where I really, really sat up. Sleep deprivation. Several of the expert discussions I went through talked about research exploring creatine under conditions of inadequate sleep or metabolic stress. And I instantly thought, oh, wait. Are we asking the wrong question here? Maybe the question isn't simply, does creatine make a perfectly rested, perfectly healthy person smarter? Maybe the more interesting question is, what happens when the brain is under energetic stress? Because sleep deprivation is not rare, especially for women, especially in midlife, especially if you have ever raised children, run a business or 2 or 3, cared for an aging parent, had hot flashes, or owned a cat who suddenly decides at 2:13 in the morning that there's a national emergency in the yard, or something over your head in bed. Like, what is that? So for women over 50, sleep deprivation is not always a laboratory condition. Sometimes it's a Tuesday. And this is where I want to be careful, because some sleep deprivation studies discussed in these interviews use different doses, very different from the standard everyday maintenance dosing. Very, very different. So some of the acute research, my tongue just got super dry. Hold please. So some of the researchers, they use high doses under controlled conditions. That's what I wanted to say. So that doesn't mean I'm telling you to do that. Like, you're not going to tonight or tomorrow morning take 25 to 30 grams. Please do not turn my YouTube into a personal dosing protocol. That's not what this is about. What fascinates me, though, is the question underneath the research. If creatine-phosphocreatine system that we have helps buffer cellular energy demands, could creatine become more relevant under conditions where the brain is stressed, sleep loss, aging, illness, high cognitive demand? So for you students, you're working on a final that's just got your brain baked. Other forms of metabolic stress. Like, again, I'm not saying the case is closed, but the case is very, very interesting. And there is a difference in how that works. Now, one thing that kept coming up with these expert conversations was the idea that a healthy, well-rested brain and a metabolically stressed brain are not always the same. And that idea stayed with me, especially because by the time I heard it, this investigation had already become very, very personal to me. So y'all met my mom. And about a month ago, there she is. About a month or so ago, something happened with my mom. And she started losing words. And I want to be clear, I'm not talking about the normal, like, why did I walk into this room that all of us women go through? Because I've been doing that since 1997. I'm talking about enough word finding difficulty that we noticed it. So she'd be talking, and the word she wanted to say, she was just grasping, and it became a thing, or that over there, and, you know, the thingy. Well, that thingy that we talked about. And that at first, like, kind of laughed it off a little bit, because that's what families sometimes do when something kind of gets you a little nervous. But we laughed and tease a little bit and try not to say out loud what we think, how scared we get when things like that happen. But 100%, I was scared, because dementia is not an abstract word in our family. And we have lived close enough to it that when someone I loved somehow started to lose their words, that just made me super scared. Super scared. And did I lose you guys? Something just happened. I just had a glitch. So anyway, can you hear me? I just lost everybody. Okay. Well, I'm still going to keep going, even if I lost y'all. So what we ended up doing with my mom was I increased her dosage on the creatine. I increased her dosage, and that was something that was my call. So I just doubled it for her. So she was already taking 5 grams. She was already taking 5 grams of creatine monohydrate a day. And because I had been deep in this research and have been listening to conversations about muscle versus brain, about the possibility that brain-focused dosing may be different conversation, about metabolic stress, about the fact that the brain may not respond exactly like skeletal muscle. I started asking questions. And so I made the decision to increase her from 5 to 10 grams. Now, before anybody runs into the kitchen, I need you to hear me very, very clearly. I'm telling you what I did with my mother. I'm not giving you personal dosing prescription. I'm not telling you 10 grams treats memory loss. I'm not going to, I don't want you to change your dose because you heard me say something on a live. That's not what this story is about. But within about 3 days, something changed. The fog seemed to lift. She said she had more energy. Her conversations were much clearer. The words were there again. And she wasn't reaching for a thingy every few sentences. She told me that she felt like she had more energy. And I remember listening to her talk and thinking, what in the world just happened? Like, how did this just happen? Now, this part's very important to me. I cannot tell you that it reverses cognitive decline. I cannot tell you another person would have the same experience. My mother is one person. She's not a randomized control trial. Although if sheer organization qualified someone to run a research institution, my mother would definitely have federal funding and the cleanest laboratory in North America. But I also refuse to pretend that the timing of this did not get my attention. It did a lot. Because when you've watched someone you love reach for words, and then within days you hear a difference, you notice and you ask more questions. And if you are me, you open another 37 tabs. And that experience changed the way that I approached all of this research, because suddenly I wasn't just asking, can creatine help somebody lift another rep? I was asking, what do we actually know about creatine in the brain? What happens under metabolic stress? What happens with aging? What happens with sleep deprivation? And what happens with when baseline creatine status differs? Does dose matter? Does duration matter? Does diet matter? Does the brain require a different conversation than muscle? And what do we still not know? A lot. Because I don't believe curiosity requires exaggeration. I do not have to claim creatine cured my mother of anything. I observed it, and it made me even more curious. So those are two very different things. And frankly, I wish more wellness conversations understood that. We're allowed to say I saw something. We're allowed to say I cannot prove why it happened. And we're allowed to say, now I want to understand it. That is exactly what happened to me. Now, my screen, I don't know if an update just happened or what. So hold on one second, because everything just moved on me. Too crazy. That's the joy of lives right now. That's the joy of lives. Okay. I'm just going to put this over here. So now let's talk about the brain energy question here. So the experts' discussions that I was listening to about the stressed brain, that hit me hard, because now I had a personal question sitting behind the scientific one. If the creatine story in a healthy, rested 25-year-old brain is one thing, could the conversation look completely different in an older brain, a sleep-deprived brain, a brain under stress, a brain dealing with illness? I don't know all the answers, but I desperately want to. And this is where I think wellness conversations can go wrong. We want everything to be binary. Does it work? Does it not work? Is it good? Is it bad? Take it, don't take it. But biology is very, very rarely tidy. Dose matters, duration matters, all that stuff matters. The tissue you're trying to influence may matter, the condition of the person. Sometimes someone who eats a lot of creatine-containing foods may not begin in the same place as someone who eats none. A healthy young athlete may not be the same research question as an older adult. So we just need to keep asking those better questions. Now, This is where the rabbit hole got even bigger because I thought I was investigating creatine and suddenly I was investigating muscle too, like brain, muscle, like all of the things that are connected. And I realized that women of my generation were trained to think about muscle in a very particular way. We were taught to shrink. We were taught to lose weight, take up less space, eat less, weigh less, do more cardio, don't get bulky, use the tiny pink dumbbells. No. Order the dressing on the side, and heaven forbid the scale ever go up. Now I've spent over 20 years in the beauty industry. I understand appearance. I care about appearance. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I have transcended vanity and now float through the life in organic linen. That'd be nice, but no. I like looking good. I would like strong bones, capable muscles, a sharp brain, healthy skin, excellent lighting. I want all the things. But at 53, my question has changed. I'm no longer asking, how little can I weigh? I'm asking, how much life can I keep living? Can I get off the floor? Can I carry my groceries in? Can I travel? Travel is exhausting. Can I travel? Can I change time zones? Can I go across the world? Can I hike? Can I work? Can I work? Can I lift something without throwing my back out and spending 3 days walking like I'm auditioning for a pharmaceutical commercial? Those are different conversations. And then one of the brain health interviews took me even deeper into the muscle brain connection because muscle is not just decorative. Muscle is metabolically active tissue. So you can see this here. When muscle contracts, it participates in signaling. Now, exercise can trigger the release of signaling molecules. And this is under the word, it's under the umbrella of myokines. And some of those signaling pathways are being studied in relation to other tissues, including the brain. So apparently my muscles have been sending emails to my brain this entire time, which is really, really awkward because I would say probably for a few years, we're probably just saying out of office because yeah, life was lifing. But think how different that makes the conversation. If muscle is participating in communication, if movement affects the signaling, if exercise influence systems relevant to brain health, then preserving muscle is not just about whether your arms look good in a sleeveless shirt. Although, we are allowed to enjoy that too. It becomes much larger conversation about function, metabolism, resilience, and potentially brain health. Now, I found another acronym. We talked about ATP earlier. Now I'm on the BDNF rabbit hole because apparently wellness researchers can't rest until normal people need flashcards. So BDNF. What is BDNF? BDNF is brain-derived neurotropic factors. BDNF is involved in processes related to neuronal health, plasticity, learning, memory, and exercise is one of the things studied in relation to BDNF. The hippocampus becomes particularly interesting because of its role in learning and memory. Now, I want to be careful here too because I'm not saying do squats and you can't get dementia. That's not going to happen. That's not what science says. I'm saying that when you start looking at exercise, muscle, cardiovascular fitness, brain-derived signaling, neuroplasticity, and cognitive reserve, the old idea that exercise is merely something women do to burn calories starts looking embarrassingly small. For decades, we told women to exercise so they can become less weight, less fat, less space. But what we should have been telling women all those years, especially in the 80s, and we were doing so much cardio, we could have ran into another state. What we should have been telling women was to exercise so that they could build more strength, build more capacity, more resilience, more independence, more reserve. And that's a completely different reason to move your body, being able to get off the floor, be able to pick your grandkids up. So different conversations require different things. We just got to talk more about this stuff. So cognitive reserve, that was another concept that the research about creatine came into play. Very simplified, cognitive reserve is a way of talking about the brain's resilience and capacity to cope with age-related changes. So now let's unpack this a little bit. Because how do I guarantee nothing bad ever happens? We can't guarantee that. Genetics matter, disease processes matter, life happens, but what can I build now? How can I support my cardiovascular health? How can I move my body? Can I challenge my brain? Can I maintain social connection? Can I prioritize sleep? Can I build and preserve muscle? Can I improve metabolic health? Can I keep learning? Can I stay curious? This is one reason I keep saying that midlife is not just a chapter where women are losing things. Yes, our hormones change. Our sleep definitely changes. Our body composition changes. Recovery time changes. But what if this is also a chapter where we become much more intentional about what we're building? We've been left out of too many conversations. And this part kind of makes me a little bit angry because women have spent decades receiving health and fitness advice that was often oversimplified. Like I said earlier, eat less, do more cardio, get smaller, don't get bulky, use the pink dumbbells. And then we hit perimenopause and menopause, and suddenly we're saying, wait, why am I losing my strength? Why does my body composition feel different? Why am I not recovering the same? Why am I waking up at 3 a.m? Why do I sometimes feel like my brain has 46 tabs open and I can't finish a sentence? And then one of those tabs is playing music, that song that you just can't get out of your head for days. Yeah, where'd that come from? But we're finally learning to ask better questions. What about muscle preservation? What about bone loss? What about strength? What about power and cognition and sleep? What about the interaction between training and nutrition and hormones and metabolic health and aging? And this is why creatine became so interesting to me. Not because I think it's magic, because it sits at an intersection of several questions I care about. All of those things: muscle, energy, aging, training, the brain, midlife. And once you see how creatine can weave into all of that, you can't unsee it. Now, creatine is not a substitute for moving your body. It's not, don't take creatine as it very still. The practical conversation is much more interesting when creatine is considered alongside things like resistance training. Maybe another rep. Maybe you can get maybe you can get stronger over time, weeks, months, years. All those small differences matter. They all matter. And this is where I think people get kind of confused. They hear creatine helps muscle and imagine the scoop itself building a bicep. I wish. My goodness, that would be amazing. But no, training is still the signal. Your body needs a reason to adapt to it, which brings me to one of women's favorite fears. Here we go. The myths that creatine has had. Myth number 1, will it make me bulky? Nope. Short answer, no. Creatine does not sneak into your house at night and turn you into the Incredible Hulk by Thursday. It's not going to happen. Building significant muscle requires stimulus, training, progressive overload, nutrition, recovery, time. And women do not accidentally wake up looking like a professional bodybuilder because they put their creatine in their coffee or their smoothie in the morning. If it only were that easy. Oh my goodness. We wouldn't be, spending way too many hours in the gym. Myth number 2, doesn't it just make you puffy? Creatine can be associated with changes in water, but the word water needs some nuance. So creatine storage is associated with water shifts, so including water within muscle tissue. Some people notice a scale change. I don't notice so much a scale change, Some people notice gastrointestinal issues. If you're worried about that, start slow and then build up to a normal daily dose. But everybody's body is different. Loading strategies can be very different from a lower daily dosing. But creatine equals puffiness is an oversimplification. And at 53, I'm trying hard to stop treating small electronic rectangle on that floor, that scale. I'm trying hard to ignore it because the scale might submit evidence, but it doesn't get the final ruling. How do you look in your clothes? How do you feel? I want juicy muscles. If it's going to add water to my muscle, great. Then my arms are going to look better in a tank top. I'm going to have more definition in my shoulders. Like, please, let's juice those up a little bit. Myth number 3, what about the kidneys? And this is where context matters. Creatine is commonly used as part of a kidney function assessment when you get your blood work done. And because creatine is related to creatine metabolism, creatine supplementation can sometimes complicate the interpretation of that marker. So does that mean you should just ignore it? Absolutely not. It means context matters. So tell your healthcare professional what supplements you're taking. You should always do that anyway. If you have kidney issues, if you have any medical conditions, concerns, or other risk factors, talk to your doctor, talk to your functional medical specialist, your nutritionist, talk to qualified clinicians. I'm not your nephrologist. And if I ever do become your nephrologist, something has gone terribly wrong in credentialing. But seriously, like if you're concerned about that, then talk with your doctor about that. All right, what kind? And this is where it's boring. Creatine monohydrate. That's it. That's what kind of creatine you should be taking. Creatine monohydrate. That has the most research, the deepest research history, because supplement marketing desperately wants to believe that the answer must come in like this flashy 17 trademarks, blah, 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 blah. Like, no. Menopause Thunder 5000. I wish. But no, boring wins on this one. Creatine monohydrate is the one and only that you should be taking. I personally take Sport creatine by Frequence. It's unflavored. It's a creatine monohydrate, third-party tested, NSF, like all of the things. Yeah, that's the one that I take. Because some people ask, well, what do you do? That's what I do. It's part of my daily routine. But I want to make sure that everybody understands this. That what I'm discussing today, all the research that I've done is on creatine monohydrate. I'm not going to take those decades of research on creatine monohydrate and pretend that automatically proves every marketing claim about one particular thing. No, those are totally different conversations. I can use a product, I can like a product, I can be fascinated by additional ideas around a product and still be honest about what the evidence actually is. And I think we need more of that in wellness. There's no cookie cutter one size fits all, but we should be asking questions about what's going on with our body. So I'm not, like with my body, I'm not taking creatine because I want to become 25 again. Gosh, I do not want to be 25 again. Yes, I had more collagen, but yeah, no, let's not go back in time. I'm taking aging more seriously because I understand something now that I didn't understand when I was younger. Aging well is not a passive sport. Strength is not vanity. Muscle is not just appearance. Sleep is not wasted time, and your brain does not separate from your body. And your body is not a collection of unrelated parts. The deeper I go into wellness, the more I see how all the connections are. Muscle to brain, sleep to energy, movement to cognition, nutrition to resilience, hormones to multiple systems, metabolic health to aging, and creatine fits right in there. And And that's a much bigger conversation than we ever originally thought. So is the case closed? Absolutely not. There's still questions. Different populations, different doses. There's so many questions out there. And that's why I'm fascinated, because I don't need certainty to be curious. I need enough evidence to ask better questions. So here's the question that I want to leave you with. It's not how little you can weigh, how young can you look, how much life can I keep living? Like, how capable can I stay? How curious can I stay? How much can I do now that makes my future full of gratitude? Because at 53, that's the investigation I care about. I want to carry my own groceries. I want to lift my own suitcase, travel. I want, the other night, I want to bring in a twin bed and mattress and springs all by myself up the stairs. Okay. I want enough muscle to support my independence as I grow older and to participate fully in my own life, and enough humility to keep learning, and enough humor to survive the fact that I can now injure myself putting on undergarments. Yeah, it happens. But I want to look good. We are allowed to say that. We are totally allowed to say that. I want strong bones. I want capable muscles. That's the alchemy of beauty. And I keep coming back to my mom, the thingy, the change we observed. I cannot promise anyone else the same experience. I cannot prove what happened, but I can tell you that made this research very, very deeply personal for me. And it keeps me coming back to that one question, was what if it helps? Not what if this is magic, what if this cures everything, but what if it helps support the strength, supports the brain, supports all the things that we talked about earlier. Yeah, I'm not trying to become somebody else. So now I want to hear from you. I want to hear from you. Before today, what did you think creatine was for? Bodybuilders, muscles, gym bros? And what rabbit hole would you like me to investigate next? Brain, menopause, muscle, sleep? Drop a word in the comments, because I already have 37 tabs open. I might as well make them useful. And if you like these deeper dives, these investigations where we take research and interviews and personal experience, a little Gen X nonsense, and try to figure out what might actually matter in life, subscribe, come back for the next case file, because I can promise you one thing. It's never smooth here. There's always a bumpy road, and I'm not done asking questions. So I'll see you next time. Bye, y'all.